G'day. So today we look at the last chapter of Paul's first letter to Timothy, who is his underling, his apprentice in gospel ministry. And in the last chapter, Paul just encourages Timothy to stay pure, to stay faultless in his ministry. And he spends quite a lot of his time talking about money. The reason he says this, the reason he's talking about money is because apparently there is false teachers who are in the church at the time, and they've used godliness for financial gain. If you have a look at verse 5, Paul says, starting from verse 4, these false teachers have an unhealthy interest in controversies and quarrels about words that result in envy, strife, malicious talk, evil suspicions, and constant friction between people of corrupt mind. He finishes by saying, these people think that godliness is a means to financial gain. That might sound crazy to think that you could use godliness as a means for financial gain, but I still think this is something that happens all over the world. Particularly in the majority world, places like Africa. When I was in Africa a few years ago, one of the locals told me that it was very common in a country where unemployment is high to go into ministry as a way of becoming rich. I was a few weeks ago listening to a podcast from The Economist, that very well-known secular magazine, and they were reporting on a pastor in Nigeria who is worth more than 150 million US dollars. These are the sorts of people who go into ministry for financial gain. Charlatans is what they are. And Paul is warning against that. He's saying that it is not right to do that. He says that what should characterize a godly person is actually contentment. Have a look at verse 6. But godliness with contentment is of great gain. And he goes on, for we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. There you go. You didn't know that was a Bible verse, but there it is. It's there. And then he says in verse 8, but if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that. And that language about food and clothing, that's tapping into the teaching of Jesus. In the Gospels, you remember where Jesus will speak about, do not worry about what you will wear or what you will eat, because the pagans worry about such things. And the flowers of the field, they're clothed in such splendor, more splendor than Solomon even. And that was just because God provided for them. And the birds in the air, they have enough to eat. Not because they work hard, but because God provides it for them. So Paul is channeling that teaching, and he's saying that if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that. Contentment is what should characterize God's people. He goes on to say that in verse 9 and 10, those who chase after money seem to find problems for themselves. Mo money, mo problems, as Notorious B.I.G., the famous rapper, once said. Verse 9, those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of different evil. Some people eager for money have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. So the pursuit of money has caused problems for many people. And most notable of the problems is that it has caused people to wander from their faith. And he says that it's pierced them with many transgressions. The trouble that comes with a life chasing after money. It's problematic, and it's not what should characterize God's people. But that might lead you to ask the question, as many of us will, what are we meant to do with our money? Because as a church on the Northern Beaches, we are people who have, in a lot of cases, pockets full of money. We have assets, and we have, we're fairly well off. Well, Paul actually addresses those people as well. Verse 17, Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in their wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. So firstly, Paul says, don't be arrogant about your wealth. And the reason we shouldn't be arrogant is because God is the one who richly provides us with everything. The fact that you have a lot indicates that God has given you a lot. And because God has given you a lot, he's expecting you to be a good steward of it. We'll get to that in a second. He also says that we should not hope in our money because it's so uncertain. But instead we should put our hope in God, who is, of course, far more sure. He's far more certain. And then he says something that might surprise you. He says that you should enjoy the wealth that you've been given. We're meant to enjoy it. It's seeing as it's a gift that God has given to us. It's something that we should enjoy. Yes, we should feel a sense of responsibility and a sense of obligation to use that money well, but you can also enjoy the wealth that you've been given. But he'll also say in verse 18 that you must be a good steward of it. Have a look. Command them to do good, speaking about these rich people, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. So you need to be a good steward of what God has given you. And then verse 19 goes on to tell us that you also need to have an eye on eternity. In this way, they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. So rather than hoping in the money in this life, which can be so uncertain, they should lay up for themselves a firm foundation in the life to come, which Paul says is truly life. And that's the life that goes on forever. So it's an encouragement to us to pursue contentment, rather than covetousness and envy, which is so common in the world that we inhabit, and to use our finances well, to not be arrogant about it, to not put our hope in it, but to enjoy it as a free gift from God and one that he wants us to steward well for him. Have a good day.